All right, good morning, men and women, and we are going to be talking integers today. And from teaching this for 15, 16 years and having a daughter that's been doing it for a couple, I know exactly where your mistakes are made. So bear with me if some of this sounds silly, but it is a foolproof way to remember it. As long as you process it and have this kind of internal dialogue running in your head when you're doing these questions, it really reduces the amount of small, careless errors. So first to start, I got a couple statements up here in black, and they're pretty obvious statements. The first one being, when you add heat to something, it gets hotter. Now, I'm trying to avoid the idea of saying when you add positives to a number, because I want you just to see it for a little bit in hot and cold. As a temperature, our number line is going to be a thermometer sort of deal, and you'll really start to see the logic of it. So anyhow, when you add heat to something, it gets hotter. If we have any number and we add more heat to it, the number will get bigger. Okay, and that's a pretty easy one to take a look at to start with. The second statement is when you apply cold to an object, it gets colder. We know that. If we put an ice pack on something, if we put ice cubes in a drink, it's going to get colder. So if we take that same thing there, and apply means to add, and we add cold to this, our answer is going to be 2, and that's a drop of 2 degrees. Now those are the first two, and those are the easiest, and that's not where people start to make the errors. It's right here where the errors start to come, because you try to base it off of what you did last time, which we're not going to do. There is no memorization for adding and subtracting of integers. It's a process of thinking. So anyhow, this next one says, what happens when you take heat away from an object? Well, heat away is subtraction. So really what the question is what happens when you subtract heat from an object? So if we had a temperature or a number of 6 and we subtract, we take away more heat or positives. If you take heat away from something, it is going to be colder. And we're going to get into a whole little scenario in very shortly about a witch and a magical cauldron and all this sort of stuff. But basically, if you take heat away from a mixture, it's going to get colder. So this answer here, where it's 6, it will be 2. It's gone down in temperature. And what happens when you remove coldness from an object? So if it was again 6, but we took away a bunch of cold cubes, if we had cold in it, if we could grasp it with our hands and remove it, the temperature of that drink or temperature of anything would go up. And would go up by the same amount. So 6 minus -4 is 10. Now, it's important to envision a number line and use logic when we're doing it. Don't try to memorize it. Don't say this is what I did on the question before it. None of that matters. You have to use this dialogue while you're doing it. It just eliminates errors. Yes, there's the whole idea of a positive times a positive is a positive, and if you see two negative signs beside each other, so many rules. But until we get this clean and get the base idea of it, we're going to use this little story, and I'll show it to you right now. Okay, so here is my number line, and it goes from -10 to +10, and number lines do go in both ways to infinity, but we're not going to bother to write them that far. We have a cauldron. That's going to be our magical cauldron, where we put hot cubes and cold cubes. Cold cubes are easy to envision as ice cubes, but hot cubes are something a little bit different. Just think we're in a magical land, and that's why the witch is there, and we're going to keep adding and subtracting out cubes, and it will affect the temperature of the mixture right there. So anyhow, I wrote one here. Sorry, I wrote a question right here of 5 plus -3. And what I did was I put how I want you to say it in your head as we're doing it, and I wrote it down. First, I color-coded it so you know which are going to be the blanks that we have to fill in when we do these questions ourselves. So this first one here tells me, am I going to be adding or subtracting? The second tells me the number of cubes that we will be adding. The third blank will tell us whether they are cold cubes or hot cubes, which will later translate into positive numbers and negative numbers. Moving down the line, this blank here will tell me whether you understand the number is going to get bigger or smaller. Now, some people can't see bigger and smaller in terms of integer solutions, so I just make it hotter and colder. And for the purpose of today and the purpose of tomorrow, everything's going to be hot and cold. Now that I know that you know whether the mixture is going to get hotter and colder, I need to know, do you need to know how to use the number line? If you're starting somewhere and you tell me it's going to get smaller or you tell me it's going to get colder, do you recognize that that is a left-hand turn down the number line? And I want you to see it. This next space tells me, do you know which number to use to move down the number line? Sometimes people, because they're not paying attention, will use the wrong number and they'll use, in this case, 5 twice. This tells me I know I'm starting here and I'm going to go 3 spaces down the number line. This one here is also telling me where you know where you're starting, and this number is your final answer. So there's a ton of information that I'm getting from you when you do these questions, and I really get to start to see if you're understanding the whole concept, how it works, whether you know the temperature will get bigger or colder or hotter, how you use the number line, and as well as your final answer. So I left lots of blanks, and I didn't want you to have to write this out every time, so I gave you a whole bunch to practice with. And in my mind, what I'd like you to start doing after today is start to just say this in your head. Then we'll just have the regular questions, and you'll just ponder them a little bit before writing an answer. I want you to stay away from your calculators for this, because it will be small numbers, and it's the process and the logic that I want to see you start to use. So I'm going to erase this. I'm going to show you a couple of examples, and you're going to get working on your own. All right, so here's my first statement that I want to try on my own. And the statement is -2 plus a +6 equals. Now, I'm good with the fact, and I know some of you can answer this straight out right now, but I'm just trying to get to the logic behind it. So bear with me, and let's just do this together. So using my one above as my guide, and what to put in, the first thing I got to know is, am I adding or subtracting? I look at my question, I'm adding. The next one says, how many am I adding? I look to this number here, and it's 6. The next one is saying, is it cold or hot? Is it positive or negative? And in this case, they're hot cubes. Remember, for this couple days, we're going to call them all hot and cold until we're all very, very good with the idea. Now, I need you to know logically that if I add heat to an object, the temperature will get right here. And if you add heat to an object, the only logical thing you can say is it gets hotter. You might find this silly, but as I walk around and as I do this, I will have 6, 7, 8, 9 people tell me the wrong answer because they are simply taking a 50-50 shot. They get a little nervous and they don't take their logic and work their way through it. Now, if a temperature gets hotter and you're working on the number line, and here's your number line right above, will you be going right or left down the number line as it gets warmer? And we know that, or we should know, and we're going to practice that we move right down the number line. The next part is, how many spaces are we going to move? We're going to move 6. Now I need you to figure out where the starting temperature was, and for this you would put in a negative if there was one. So there's my -2. Now that I have that, you're going to go back up to your number line, and your number line can be in your head for smaller questions. But we're right here at -2. This is my starting point. You've already told me that you're moving to the right, and you're moving to the right 6 places. So here we go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. My answer to this question would be 4 degrees. This is very, very logical. It is very organized, and I need you to kind of process this way of thinking while we're doing it. Anyhow, I'm going to do one more, and then you're off on your own. All right, guys, here's our last one here, and my question's in green. The question I'm going to ask you is 6 subtract -3. So we're going to use our 2 examples that we have, and we'll always go back to the top one. It's color-coded and should be in your notes as well. If it's not, take a second and go highlight the important parts that you have to do. Anyhow, as we know, our first blank will tell me whether this is pause or addition or subtraction. When I look here, I know it's subtraction. I'll just write sub. The next one asks, how many am I subtracting away from my original? And it is 3. The next blank is going to say, is this going to be hot cubes or cold cubes? Am I taking away a positive or a negative? Remember, we're going to stick with hot and cold for today. So in this case, you will be taking away cold. Now go back and start to read the sentence towards the next blank at the very end. When I subtract 3 cold cubes from the mixture, the temperature will get. If you're honestly thinking about what you're saying as you're reading that sentence, and you're taking cold out of the mixture, you should know that it will get hotter. The temperature will not get colder as you remove cold. It'll only get hotter. It's a little bit logical. Now that I know it's getting hotter, you have to know which way that is down the number line. Which way, left or right on the number line, shows an increase in value. And we know to move right down the number line shows an increase of value. And you're going to move down the number line 3 spaces. The starting temperature was 6. And now we go here. There's 6. You've already told me that I'm going to move to the right. You told me that I'm going to move to the right 3 spaces. So starting at 6, you will go 1, 2, 3. Your answer is going to be 9. We're going to do this another 12 times or so. Get lots of practice so you can see it. And then hopefully when I give you the straight questions where I don't ask you to fill in these blanks, you can process this through your head and start to say this on your own. All right, guys, good luck. Listen to this video again if you need it, and ask me any questions you need.